Allow me to tell you a story. It's a very personal one. But, truth be told, it's a story that has, in a sense, partly defined my life. When I could see again, the driver was climbing into the caleche, and the wolves had disappeared. This was all so strange and uncanny that a dreadful fear came upon me, and I was afraid to speak or move. The time seemed interminable as we swept on our way, now in almost complete darkness, for the rolling clouds obscured the moon. We kept on ascending, with occasional periods of quick descent, but in the main, always ascending. Suddenly, I became conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a strange, ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line across the moon-lit sky. When I was in grade 10, I was perhaps one of the least popular kids in school. Every day was a challenge for me, to say the least. I had my adolescent issues, I was incredibly socially awkward, and I was quite the ugly duckling. But one thing I really did love was the English class, and my teacher, Cynthia. Cynthia was one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. She was a privilege to have. And one day, she surprised the class by starting to read Dracula by Bram Stoker. She only read the first few chapters in Jonathan Harker's diary, the last of which was the conclusion that I just read you. And it was that conclusion that got me interested. A couple of days later, I went to the local library and I searched high and low for the book Dracula, and finally I found it. As soon as I came home, I cracked that baby open and I read it from cover to cover. My parents insisted on taking a road trip to a historical mining town, Ravenswood, if I'm not mistaken. And the ride was quite long, so I took my book with me, and you could not take it out of my hands. Lunchtime, I was still reading at the table. My parents had to force me away from my book in order to get me to have a shower, brush my teeth, and go to bed. Though I did not sleep. Well, I didn't sleep for a very long time because I was that enamored with the book in front of me. Every single chapter, every single character, all of them stuck within my mind because of the sheer imagination of them. Truth be told, I had never read anything like Dracula to that point. Most of the books I read was, say, R.L. Stein's Fear Street or Goosebumps, and just a general assortment of stuff, but Dracula was an enormous exception. Now, as many of you may quite possibly know, quite a few of the reviews on this site from me have been based on Dracula. None of them really capture the true spirit of the book, but they appeal to me nonetheless. Not just because of the character of Dracula, but what he stands for. I could go at length how much I love this novel and how loud and clear the themes speak to me. But just for now, I want to focus on the character of Dracula because he is the book. I mean, I like quite a few of the other characters. I love Mina Murray, I love Dr. Seward, and I love Dr. Van Helsing. So, what is it about Dracula that I love, really? Well, for one thing, he just doesn't give a fuck. He's one of those villains, and as you may know from my other video that celebrates the whole thing about villainy, the thing about Dracula is that despite the fact that he is a beast, you can't help but feel that there's more to him. Now, by the time Jonathan Harker completes his tale in his diary, in the first part of the book, you don't actually see him a lot. Other characters, cite him, but it's not for very long. In one of Mina Murray's passages, she essentially sees her BFF Lucy being bitten by Dracula. She doesn't see Dracula in detail, but she sees two red eyes looking up at her in this misty, dark graveyard, and it's images like that haunt me. Why? Well, Dracula is otherworldly, but at the same time, he is something that you can, in a sense, connect to. To me, Dracula also represents capitalism, the propagation of one's needs outweighing everybody else's. He wants blood, he wants life, and he doesn't care who he has to, run down in order to attain it. Although the argument could be said that Dracula as a character may not necessarily be focused, there is no denying his impact. I suppose it comes down to the fact that there's no real way for me to articulate the particulars of what Dracula stands for, but here is what I think. I think he stands for capitalism. He also stands for the Victorian phenomenon of xenophobia. Just think about it. Virile, powerful European men coming to the very quaint and very sort of modern UK to steal the women and spread disease. Aha! Disease! Disease, of course, like vampirism, is synonymous. Also, unsafe sex. When Dracula bites you, that's it. Okay, you are infected with sickness. Whether or not you become just like him is more or less left up to speculation, but Lucy is a prime example of, a woman who becomes infected by this menace from overseas. Naturally, that's how it works, of course. Also, here's where it gets a little bit controversial for me. Dracula represents a punishment of the modern woman. Mina Murray herself is said to be the modern woman. What was the modern woman? Well, the modern woman was not quite like the delicate, soft, feminine sort of thing. She was more or less a man in a woman's clothing. But still, men still had to feel the need to protect women, because again, that's how it worked. So, with Dracula acting as the, essentially, the judge, the jury, and the executioner of the human, and more along the lines, female species, you could say that he also stands for the phenomenon of patriarchy. Don't worry, I'm not going to go too far into that, because that is a completely different discussion, and that's not even going to be... It's impossible to talk about something like that in a video that's 15 minutes long, so don't worry. So please don't switch off the video and curse my name. But, yeah, the character of Dracula is a very interesting character. And it's little wonder that somebody, or rather something so potent and so powerful, had an effect on me. When you are an adolescent, especially if you were one like myself, you're confused about who you were. You weren't sure about where you stood in life. You had no real major aspirations. You didn't have any sort of concrete opinions on the world. And to the best of your knowledge, nobody understood you. There were no adults that truly respected who you were, and you know what? You were all in the same boat as teenagers. As an adolescent, you are confused. You do not have it easy. So for me and my relationship with Dracula, Count Dracula the character, it's a rather strange sort of catharsis for me. how can I really explain it? Well, I don't know. He's almost like who I would want to be, but I know I can't be. I cannot be a blood-sucking demon from the Nether realm. I cannot be absolutely conscienceless about it. If that's even a word, I'm sorry. I can't not show remorse for my actions. I have to have accountability. I need to have a couple of good people in my life who, I could never use the way somebody would use currency. It's all really wild and strange, and it's still not something that I can fully comprehend, but at the same time, this book had so much of an impact on me. It spoke to me on multiple levels that even now, at 31 going on to 32 years, still can't quite wrap my head around. And perhaps that is the biggest attraction I have to the character. I don't fully understand him, and you know what? Perhaps, maybe, I'm not supposed to. He is way beyond my comprehension as a human being. I don't think any human being can relate to Dracula because they're not supposed to. But he also represents what we could be, or rather what I could be, without any inhibition. It's very egocentric of me to say, I know, but when it comes down to characters that you like, no matter how sort of far distance they are from you, you do feel a tinge of, yes, this is something I could be, but I can't. But it's nice to think about. So yeah, I do apologise if this video has been nothing more than ramble to you, but I just felt the need to talk about it, to confess maybe. Because again, I read Dracula during a very difficult time in my life, and when you are faced with adversity, everything you see, everything you hear and read and watch, somehow it shapes who you are going to be as a person as you grow older. Truth be told, I don't go out and suck the necks of unwilling victims and buy churches and fill them with my native North Queenslander soil. But it just all keeps on coming back to those awkward, terrible years that I was experiencing as a teenager. And in a sense, I have Dracula to thank for that, to thank me for getting through and not giving up on my life. And of course, my teacher Cynthia. Were it not for Cynthia and her picking up that book and reading those few passages in the class, maybe I may not have been the same person I am today. I don't know. Well, in case you hadn't figured it out, that is another one of my 32 favourite things. Count Dracula and the book. You know, one day I really should get around to reviewing the book one day because it is a corker. It is almost an essential book for any self-respecting bookworm / horror lover to at least read. Only once. You don't have to necessarily love it, but you can look back and say, hey, yes, I have read Dracula, and for better or worse, maybe that validates me as a fan of horror, maybe not, who cares, but I read it. And this is why I'm not a teacher. I can't be very, very motivational, can I? Motivational or educational. But yes, that was another one of my videos, and it's not long until I turn 32 now, so I've got to pick up the pace. So yes, you all take care of yourselves and each other, and I shall see you another time. Bye bye.